my pet food costs, I was wondering if these ingredients were cool with y'all.
Yeah, sure. What do you want to know?
Alright, diseased animals.
Yep. I'll allow it.
Wait, what? Animals that died otherwise than by slaughter. Like that random cow over there.
That's fine with me.
Are you sure that's a good idea? Restaurant food waste.
I see no problem with that.
That's definitely not okay. Fish residue meal.
Yep. That's allowed.
Could you not? Food processing waste.
Yeah, I don't see the problem with that either.
Is anybody else concerned about this? Hey, can I take this back with me?
Hello and welcome to another episode, a very special episode this evening of Sovereignsisterspodcast. Podcast. Here again with Tammy Hayes and Lisa Richard and our very special guest who our own Tammy is going to introduce to you.
All right. Welcome, everyone. We are thrilled to have Dr. Judy with us this evening. She is a true trailblazer in the world of veterinary medicine with an impressive 39 years of experience under her belt. She stands as a beacon of knowledge in integrative veterinary care, acupuncture, chiropractic, and holistic nutrition. But Dr. Judy is more than just a seasoned practitioner. She's a catalyst for change, a tireless advocate for the furry companions who share our lives. In a world where pet health can often be overshadowed by profit margins and questionable practices, Dr. Judy stands tall as a fierce defender of animal well-being. Her passion for natural healing therapies has not only transformed the lives of countless pets, but also has empowered pet owners worldwide to make informed choices about their beloved companions' care. What sets Dr. Judy apart is her unwavering commitment of speaking her truth, even when it challenges the status quo. She fearlessly exposes the dark underbelly of the pet food industry, shedding light on the dangers of chemicals, over-vaccination, and subpar nutrition. Her advocacy has sparked conversations, triggered change, and at times rattled the very foundations of the industry. Tonight, she joins the Sovereign Sisters. We stand in awe of Dr. Judy's dedication, her courage, and her unyielding spirit. It's an honor to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So we're going to talk tonight about what's going on here in the pet food industry. There's a lot of chatter, a lot of things happening.
There's a lot going on. So first, I'm going to explain the intro video. That is my daughter, actually, and she's the COO of my company, Naturally Healthy Pets. And AFCO that she was talking about, the person dressed up with the clipboard, that is a regulatory, well, not even a regulatory person. It's a person from the American Association of Feed Control Officials, and that's AFCO. AFCO basically makes the rules for what is allowed to go into feed for animals. So our pets, the food that we are giving our pets, commercial foods, are regulated the same way as livestock feed. So cattle feed, horse feed, sheep, pigs, chickens. So it's all regulated the same way. And all of those things that she talked about are allowed in pet food. So going to slaughterhouses in veterinary school, so going back 40 years, well, more, 44, going back to vet school, we had to go to slaughterhouses and see the processing of everything. And so as the animals would be killed, and then they would be taken apart, and I hope nobody's eating dinner while we're doing this, and then the animals are taken apart. Let's just say, as they're inspecting the carcass, they find a big tumor, or they find a big, nasty spot in the meat. Well, that can't go to the human food market, so it gets cut out and thrown into a big waste barrel. And all of that waste, so cancerous tissue, all the parts and pieces that are not used in the human food industry go in that barrel. And then those barrels get picked up and go to the rendering plant to be made into pet food. So not only do we have the worst of the worst parts of the animal, also when she talked about animals that died otherwise than by slaughter. So a slaughterhouse, the animal was shipped there to be made into meat for the human food chain. And what happens to a cow that dies out in the field, or a pig that dies in the pigsty, or poultry that has to be killed because of a disease that goes through the hen house? What happens to all of that? That goes to pet food. So we can have a cow that laid out in the field rotting for 3 days, and all of those get put into trucks and they get trucked off to rendering plants. There are many of them. If you live near one, you know what they are because you can smell them for miles. And the heaps of dead animals sit out rotting in the sun until they get around to cooking them. And then they cook them down into like a big melting pot. And so the fat that comes off of that, that rises to the top, that is used in a lot of different industries, but it's also used in pet food. And then we have a product called meat and bone meal, because this could be any animals that are in that rendering vat. And euthanasia solution exists in pet food. FDA knows it. They've known it since the 1990s. And you would say, where would euthanasia solution come from? Well, let's see. Dead dogs and cats end up in that pile sometimes too. And horses who have been euthanized can end up in that pile. And we don't normally feed in this country horse meat, dog meat, cat meat to our pets, or at least we don't think we do. However, when they do DNA testing on pet food, they find dog DNA, cat DNA, horse DNA. Is any of that on the label? Nope. And so FDA putting those animals that died of natural causes, illness, cancer, whatever, downed cows, that weren't set to slaughter, that actually is illegal. The food laws, the pet food laws, state that you can't use those products, and FDA is in charge of regulating all of that. AFCO doesn't regulate; they just set rules. Um, and when we asked FDA about that, they said, we consider it non-actionable. We don't think it's a problem. We don't want all those animals going into a landfill. So we're going to use it for pet food. The other thing is, if you have a dead animal, what are you going to do with it? Do you send it to the landfill? Well, you're probably going to have to pay to have somebody haul it away for you. Or you can actually make money on it by sending that dead animal off to the rendering plant. And so the same with like the human food processing wastes. Where do you put rice hulls? Where do you put the husks of like psyllium husk? Where do you put all those things that they're not used, like wheat millings? It's basically after the good parts of the grains are taken out, what's left, just that fibrous covering, goes off to pet food because it's a filler. And the pet food company, so I'm basically talking about kibble, which is an extruded product. It's made like cereal. The Kellogg family actually started the whole extrusion process. Them and the pet food people started the extrusion process. And it basically takes all the dry ingredients, adds moisture, and cooks them at very high heat, forces them through a high pressure heat tube, and it comes out the other end in these little dried brown balls, which is not what our pets are supposed to be eating. And in order to make the extruder work, the food has to have at least 50% or more carbohydrates, because if you put more than 25 to 30% meat through the extruder, you end up with a big gunky mess, and you do not end up with anything that resembles anything that anybody would ever want to eat. It also destroys most of the vitamin and mineral content, which is why when you buy these big bags of pet food, you will see a whole chemical list added on there. That's all the vitamins and minerals that have to be added back in. And then at the end, the food is sprayed with fats to make it more palatable. It's fats and palatants, so chemicals that make it tasty. Otherwise, there's no way our animals would ever go near it because it's kind of just dull, boring, has no smell, it very little taste. So it's sprayed with a palatant.
Kind of like the MSG they used to add.
Exactly. So the problem with that is we've now sprayed fats onto a food with a shelf life of minimum 2 years, although one pet company has proudly stated the food in our bag will still be good in 25 years.
Right.
25
Right.
years. That's a lot of preservatives. So
Right.
we use chemical preservatives. Ethoxyquin was supposedly banned years ago because it is carcinogenic. How about that? However, ethoxyquin is commonly used to preserve fish and fish meal. And if it is put on the fish or fish meal prior to arriving at the pet food processing plant, they don't have to put it on the label. So if something was added before it got to them, it's like nothing to see here. So
Right.
lots of fun. And so we do get problems with rancidity. It's really interesting because people for quite a while were sending me these great pictures of stacks of bags of kibble in the front window of big box pet stores. No shading or anything on the glass, just bright light in the sun. It's like, okay, you are beaming sunlight onto a product that wants to go rancid. Like, can anybody like get their head out of their butt and at least put it not
Right.
in direct sunlight? And so the problem is, I had one client one time who had a little 5-pound Chihuahua, and he said, I buy, and the dog was having so many problems. I was like, what are you feeding this dog? And he said, oh, I buy a 50-pound bag of a very low quality dry kibble, and I only have to buy it once a year, and it lasts all year. And I'm like, do you know how stale that is, and
Right.
how many storage mites are in there, and how rancid that is by the time you get to the end of a year of an open bag of food? It's, once you open it, it's good for about 3 weeks.
Yes.
And he said, well, I'm not going to spend any more money than that. And this, we're going back a lot of years, but it was a 50-pound bag and it was $7.
Right. And that's one of the things we've always told everybody. You've got about 2 weeks. Now you said 3, 2 to 3 weeks to, once you open up that bag, to use that food up, because it will turn rancid with all the fish oils.
And, you know, for all these animals with allergy problems, storage mites, hello, mites are itchy.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Judy, can I ask you a question going back to the processing? Does the animal who is not slaughtered, the one that dies another way, whether euthanized or not, if there are chemicals used to euthanize that pet, is that also going into the dog food, those chemicals?
Euthanasia solution. So
Yep.
we had a huge lawsuit.
Yep.
Oh gosh, probably about 5 years ago with,
At least, yeah.
With Evangers. Hunks of beef, it was called. It was a canned food. And a lawyer happened to open cans of the food and fed her 5 pugs. And they started, within a very short period of time after eating, they all started stumbling around the kitchen, falling over. She rushed them all to the vet. One died, and the veterinarian was smart enough to say, oh, well, this had to be related to the food. Your dogs were fine 2 hours ago, and then they ate, and now they're not fine. And so they tested the stomach contents, and they also had the open can of food and some unopened cans of food and tested them and found there were very high levels of euthanasia solution, which is pentobarbital, that were in there, and that's what killed her dog. So that was a nice little lawsuit. But that euthanasia solution, the pentobarbital, they've known it's in the food since I used to have something hanging in my clinic. It was a little blurb from the FDA. And it was from like the late 1990s, or actually it was later than that, but it said, we have known since about 1995 that there is euthanasia solution in pet food. Again, we find it non-actionable.
Right. I remember we used to have people when Origin was found with pentobarbital, I believe.
Oh, a lot of them have been.
Oh, a lot of them have been. But we used to have people come in and say, you know, I don't understand. How is there a euthanasia drug in there? I'm like, that is proof that they are using pentobarbital, or they're using euthanized pets in the food that you're feeding your dog.
Or horses, or whatever.
Yeah, anything. Yep.
Anything. It could
I
come from
wouldn't.
anywhere.
Yeah, they are probably using people at this point. I wouldn't, put that past them. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But
Soylent Green. Yeah, I
yeah,
wouldn't put it past them. Yeah, I'm with
I
you.
just want to thank you though for being an advocate for the pets, being a veterinarian, especially because veterinarians make money off of sick animals, right? Just like the medical industry does.
Well,
And
and
you
I get a lot
speaking
of
out,
pushback. The traditional veterinary community does not believe any of this.
Right.
And I would love to invite all of them to go to an AFCO meeting. None of them do. I was the only practicing veterinarian to ever show up at the AFCO meetings, which is just an exercise in frustration. You have to pay $500 to get in the door and sit with 500 regulatory people who and lobbyists who are lobbying to get their ingredients approved. So a lot of people there are from like the waste oil industry and the just any waste industry looking to offload and make money off of their waste products. And I don't think people realize that grocery store, it's called dried baked goods, grocery store waste. So when you go to the grocery store and you're looking through the dairy aisle or you're looking through the bakery aisle, all of that stuff has an expiration date on it. When it's expired, it all goes into a big bin, and all of that again gets transported off to a processing plant and it gets used in animal feed.
And
They don't take it out of the containers. All of
right.
the plastic is ground up
Right.
as well.
The
So
plastic and the
all the
styrofoam that the
chemicals,
meat's wrapped in. Yep.
all of that stuff
oh
is
my,
going in. And there was a great FDA went after a company in California earlier this year, and it became public because they had all of these dried or all of these expired products in a heap in the sun in their parking lot. And all of all of the oil and antifreeze, whatever was coming out of cars, was washing across the parking lot, mixing with this stuff. There was birds pooping on it, rodents running through it, bugs. And so FDA came down on them and said, okay, you've got to put stuff under cover. You can't have it in the parking lot. And I looked up this stuff and everybody said, oh no, it's only used in livestock feed. Well, first of all, I don't even want that going into the cow whose milk I'm going to drink or meat I'm going to eat. Second, I went on the website and it said that they use dried bakery products in pet food. The company makes it for pet food as well. So if you think that you are feeding a really clean product, a lot of the times you are not.
Right.
So, there are ways around it. Look for organic, look for ingredients that you can read the name and know what it is. If it says beef liver, I know what that is. That's awesome. If it says meat byproducts, I don't even know what animal that came from because it just says meat. And byproducts basically means anything that was not human edible. So it could be intestines. We brought up something at an AFCO meeting a few years ago, and everyone on the AFCO panel was shocked because we knew something they didn't. We said, well, your definition of poultry says the clean meat and organs or / byproducts devoid of feathers, feces, etc., as much as possible. And we said, well, when they slaughter an entire house full of chickens that's going to be used for pet food, do you know how they do it and how they process them? And they went, no. And we said, well, they spray them with a foam to suffocate and kill them, usually. But sometimes they don't even do that. But then they have these big, basically vacuum grinders at one end of the chicken house, and all the chickens are sucked into it whole. So if they're lucky, they're dead first. Boy, I hope nobody's eating dinner. So when you do that, you're not taking out the feathers. You're not taking out the feces that's in the intestines. You are getting the entire bird. And there were people there from the poultry industry, and the people on the panel, when we went up to the microphone and said this, they were like, no, that's not how it's done. That's not what the definition says. We're like, well, you don't follow any of the other definitions either. But And somebody from the poultry industry said, "Oh yeah, no, that is how it's done." And they were all shocked. Like, you guys don't even know what you're doing.
Right. So, I mean, you gave most people a glimpse on in just the pet food industry in general. What's going on right now? No, this is nothing new, but we have even worse news.
Yeah. So for anybody who's old enough, back in 2007, we had thousands of pets dying, and they were dying of kidney failure. And, finally there were enough new kidney failure cases that the veterinarians kind of went, wow, something's going on. Like, why are we getting all these dead dogs and cats? And actually, I had a cat that died because my neighbor, when I bought my house, it came with a cat. And the neighbor came over, and it was kind of the neighborhood cat, but it came with my house, so I fed it. The neighbor came over and he said, "My kids really like this cat. I've been letting it come in my garage. Is it okay if we feed it? Is it okay if I let them bring it in the house? Sometimes they really like it, and we don't have a pet, and I don't want a pet." And I was like, "Yeah, fine. You can feed the cat, and they can pet the cat, but the cat's welcome here, and I'll feed the cat." And then a while later, he knocked on my door and said, "I hate to tell you, but I found the cat dead in our garage." And I was like, "Oh shoot, like maybe he obstructed, maybe he had a blockage," because I knew they were feeding kibble, which I don't feed. So I felt kind of bad, but he had already disposed of the cat. So what are you going to do? And then a few weeks later, I was actually at a pet expo in Harrisburg, and I was sitting in a restaurant having dinner, and the TV was on over the bar. And they said, "Oh, there's this huge problem with pet food. Thousands of pets are dying, and we don't know what's causing it." And then after lots of investigation, we discovered it was melamine, which, melamine dishware. So melamine was being put in ingredients that were being made in China to artificially elevate the protein content of the ingredients, because then it's more valuable. And unfortunately, it's toxic. And then interestingly, I was in China the next year, and all of a sudden we couldn't get any kind of dairy products to put in our coffee or have on our food or anything. And it was because they found melamine in the dairy products in China, and infants were dying of kidney failure from it being in the formula in the milk. So it's a common problem. The guy that in China that they found guilty for the pet food thing was actually beheaded. They take things seriously over there when you do something really awful and screw up. But anyway,
We could take an example to that. That would be, yeah.
So tens of thousands of pets died. So, fast forward, every year there's some sort of huge recall. Midwest Pet Foods a couple years ago, huge recall for mold toxins, aflatoxins, which cause liver failure. So it was really high in their foods. We get bacterial, Salmonella, E. coli, Listeria recalls quite commonly. We get mold aflatoxin recalls quite commonly as well. And then 5 years ago, there was a major recall for excess vitamin D in the pet food. And you might say, well, how can you have excess vitamin D? Well, remember I said there's all those chemicals that are added into the food to put the vitamins back in? Well, somebody calculated wrong, and oopsie, we put too much vitamin D in, and guess what? Too much vitamin D causes kidney failure and death in pets. So shocking, here we are again, tens of thousands of pets dying. And some veterinarians start scratching their heads going, wow, we're getting too many kidney failures and too many deaths. What's going on here? And it took about 10 months to get that recall to occur. And unfortunately, when there's a problem with pet food, it takes tens of thousands of animals dying before anyone will do anything, before anyone will say anything. And they'll try to hide it because they don't want a recall.
Right.
So,
because it's all money to them. It's the bottom line.
Right.
It's bottom line, reputation and money.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Because FDA posts, if there's a recall, you can go to the FDA website. You can actually, there's a lot of websites you can go to and say, has pet food XYZ ever had a recall? If so, what for? And you'll find out every recall they've ever had. And unfortunately, you could have one pet get sick and end up with a recall, especially if it's a raw pet food, because FDA is very against raw pet food feeding. CDC is against it. The American Veterinary Medical Association is against it. The American Animal Hospital Association is against it. I've been a raw feeder for 20 years. My dogs and cats are doing great. Nobody in my family's ever gotten sick. And by the way, most bacterial deaths and illnesses in people associated with pet food are associated with kibble,
Yes.
which is dry pet food that is usually loaded with salmonella. But they don't test that very often unless they get a lot of complaints. So in December of 23, so just a few months ago, a woman by the name of Kelly Bone, whose dog, her service dog, died from the vitamin D recall or vitamin D toxicity. The dog died 2 weeks before the recall came about, and she was mad. So she started this Facebook group, and she doesn't even have a dog anymore. She started this Facebook group called Saving Pets One at a Time. And on there, she made a big deal about her dog dying at the hands of pet food and invited other people to talk about their experiences with it and to let her know if their pet was getting sick. And it's a holistic page, so people can ask other questions about flea and tick chemicals and vaccines and other things that are also wrong with the pet industry. But in December, she started noticing a huge uptick in complaints of dogs and cats dying, having bloody vomiting and diarrhea, having seizures, having hives, horrible itching, hair falling out by the handful. And so she kind of sat on it. And then about January 2nd or 3rd, she reached out to me and said, Dr. Morgan, I've got something going on here. I've got hundreds of people telling me the same thing. And so we went on Amazon and Chewy and Petco, all their websites, and looked up the foods that she was talking about and looked at the 1-star reviews and saw the same thing. Lots and lots of 1-star reviews with animals that didn't want to eat the food, were backing off the food, were vomiting, chronic diarrhea, or sudden death. And I said, oh my gosh, this. And then I went to her page and I read hundreds of entries of people with these animals that were just in dire straits. And nobody was putting 2 and 2 together. And so I have a huge social media following, and I raised a red flag and said, we can't sit on this. We got to find out what's going on. And the way to find out what's going on is to ask people. We need to make this public and say, hey, is anybody else having this problem? And the problem across the board, for the most part, seemed to be associated with opening a new bag, box, or can. So a lot of people said, well, I've been feeding the same exact thing for the past 10 years and I've never had a problem, but now suddenly my pet refuses to eat this stuff. And there were so many sad cases where people were like, my pet refused to eat it. I doctored it up with cheese. I doctored it up with boiled chicken, and then they ate it and then they died. And, talk about feeling guilty. It's like, I just convinced my pet to eat poison or something toxic and they died. Or, people reporting spending thousands and thousands of dollars in the emergency rooms trying to save their pets.
Right.
Most people care more about their pet's health than they do their own health,
Right.
I mean, it's so devastating, and it's just common sense. If they just sit here and do some research themselves or listen to people like you that have done it, and you know what's in the real pet food, why would you even feed that to your animal once you know that?
Right.
I mean, you're literally killing your animal yourself if
But
you
it's
decide to do
so
that.
amazing the pushback that we have gotten. I mean, I have been bad mouthed. I have a huge folder full of people that I'm going to go after for slander. The pushback that I'm getting, I mean, I've had other veterinarians yell in my face, tell me I should lose my license. I shouldn't be allowed to do anything for animals. I'm giving the profession a bad reputation. They're defending these pet food companies right and left. And I'm like, maybe I have information that you don't, and maybe I know something that you don't, and maybe.
Do they get a kickback for promoting certain pet foods and stuff?
No. So here's what happens. Everybody talks about kickbacks, but that's not what it is. And the margins on pet food are really low. It's like 20%. So if I'm going to sell a vaccine in my clinic, I'm going to have a high profit margin. If I'm going to sell pet food in my clinic, I'm going to have a low profit margin. However, sales of pet food, particularly prescription diets, can make up to 20% of the gross income in a veterinary practice. So while the profit margin per unit is not very big, when you sell enough of it, there's profit. And associate veterinarians who are paid on commission, they get zero commission on pet food. So if you have an associate doctor in the practice, particularly if it's corporate practice, they get paid a percentage of diagnostic tests that they do, surgeries that they do, vaccines that are given, medicines that are prescribed, but not pet food. The problem is that the veterinary schools and the veterinary conferences are sponsored with big money from all the pet food and pharmaceutical companies. It's the same with
Yeah,
medical
just like
doctors,
our medical
with any
industry.
industry, any industry.
We have
So,
I'm sorry. I
yeah.
didn't mean to interrupt you.
So
I was going to say we have a question from our attendees. Somebody's asking, for the current food issue at hand, have you tested for any bug protein? I heard some manufacturers were starting to introduce bug protein in their kibble products.
Oh, they are. It's again, it just got approved at the last AFCO meeting for black soldier fly larvae are allowed in pet food, or it's in the tube going through the approval process. It may have actually been, I think it was. And there's a company called Jiminy's that's been out there for a long time selling treats and food made with cricket protein and other bug proteins. That's not where our toxicity is. The bugs are not an issue. I'm not going to feed bugs to my pets. I don't think it's an appropriate protein source. I don't even know what the amino acid breakdown is on bugs. Are they high in taurine? Are they high in carnitine? I don't know. I don't think anybody has done enough research on that, and I don't think they care. It's part of the whole agenda that let's all go green.
But don't the bugs have parasites?
No. And what we're seeing, this is a sudden death. So this isn't even like we tested food. When this came about, I said, all right, well, let's test a bunch of food. Let's see what we got. We tested for bacteria, not there. Tested for euthanasia solution, not there. Tested for mold toxins, not there. Tested for vitamin D, not there. Tested for melamine, not there. And none of those things would cause the sudden death. We have a litter of puppies, that really high-end, well-bred puppies. Their very first meal, she mashed up the dried kibble and mixed it with some milk or whatever. Their very first meal, within an hour, the entire litter was hypersalivating, seizing. One of them died. They did a necropsy on it at Cornell, and the results were, this absolutely is not anything infectious. This is a toxin. These dogs were poisoned. Problem is, I haven't seen any toxicology results, and nobody has tested stomach contents. It's like, well, if you have an animal that just ate something, kind of like the lady and that's why the pug story was so important with the euthanasia solution. She was a lawyer and she had a smart vet, and they were smart enough to test stomach contents and test the food. And they didn't know what they were looking for at the time. So basically, we have been ruling out what it's not, and we have a really good idea of what it is, but testing for it is about as close to impossible as you can get.
It's because they know what's in there too. They don't want
know.
people to find out. Yeah.
They absolutely know.
If you found a baby raccoon and they thought for an inkling that it had rabies, they would kill it immediately and test its brain. Why are they not testing our beloved pets?
Well, they're destroying the food.
They are destroying the food. And it gets better because then we had, so the Facebook page went from about 17,000 people at the beginning of January to about 117,000 now. So in 2 months, 100,000 people have joined that group. And it's 100,000 people who are saying, oh, my dog's had diarrhea for months and I didn't equate it with the food. And I changed the food and wow, my animal has energy. They're running around. They're not itching. No more bloody vomit and diarrhea. They're not having seizures. It's like, oh, eye opening. But we still have tons of animals that are dying. And the problem is, it's like when an animal dies, first of all, you've got a very distraught owner because usually this is sudden. A lot of them, it's like the puppies, it's that one meal and they're dead, or 3 meals. And a lot of them, it's 3 meals and they're dead. And so all the naysayers who are like, I've never had a problem, I'm going to keep buying the food. Okay, just watch closely. And then 3 meals later, they're like, oh crap, I have a dead dog. Maybe I should have listened. Yeah, maybe. We have breeders who are reporting deformed puppies in their litters or stillbirths, abortions, just, tons of things going on. So then all these people on this Facebook page, now we've got everybody engaged in this. And so they started reporting that literally tons, truckload after truckload of pet food are being dumped in landfills. Why are you dumping food in landfills if there's nothing wrong with your food? They don't want to admit there's a problem.
Right.
There was a nice hit piece in the New York Times. They interviewed the pet food company that started this whole thing.
I'm surprised they didn't send it to another country. That's usually what they do with tainted things
Well,
here.
we've got reports all over the world because most of these companies are worldwide. So they interviewed the pet food company. They didn't interview me. And they basically threw me under the bus and said that this whole thing is just a rumor and it's being done for clicks and likes on social media. And it's being done so that I can sell my own pet food. I don't own a pet food company. So thank you very much for the slander. But about 2 to 3 days after getting a report at one particular landfill of truckload after truckload after truckload of pet food being dumped, a person in a local community next to the landfill, there's also 1,000 acres surrounding that landfill that is preserved land. And this guy posted, and he had over a dozen dead coyotes lined up next to each other and said, is somebody putting bait out for the coyotes? Because that could affect other wildlife and our dogs. So you shouldn't do that. And he had to take the post down because the community site said, well, you can't post dead animals pictures. Okay, that's great. But we got screenshots. It's fine. But that may have helped us, but we don't know. And I feel bad for the coyotes, but it gave us the opportunity to call EPA and Fish and Game and Wildlife.
So,
and say, hey, you might have a problem.
So did they test them? I'm sorry.
We have no idea.
Okay.
So what about these families who just refuse to stop feeding kibble and their child or their baby, you know how kids are, going around playing with it, putting their hands in the dog's dishes, put it in the mouth.
I have said that.
What happens when your child now dies because they're eating a poison that's in this food because you refuse to stop feeding it.
Exactly. I have said that many times, and I'm like, this is dangerous for family members other than your pets as well. I mean,
I can tell
people
you,
leave kibble out all the time. It's just out.
Yes, because they think their dog or a cat are grazers, that they could just eat it throughout the day. I can tell you, because I'm behind the scenes with you on some of these things. I've had people bring in, somebody brought in a little baggie of kibble and bits because the dog just died 3 days ago after eating it. And I was going to send the sample to you. Well, you could smell it just emanating out of this little Ziploc bag. And I'm like, this is disgusting. So I put it inside of another Ziploc bag. First off, they didn't bring enough. They didn't bring me any information about the lot code or anything like that. I brought it into the house, laid it on my island, on my kitchen island, and didn't think anything of it. Well, later on, I come in and one of my cats is on the counter trying to open up the bag and get to it. I'm like, no, I'm like yelling. And I got the cat off and I'm like, do you have any idea? No, this cat had no idea. But, if it would have eaten it, it probably would also be dead as well.
My daughter's cat did
So,
the same thing.
we have been trying to get people to stay away from at least the pet foods that we have gotten reports from. But what people have to understand is that, if this toxin is in at the manufacturing plant, it's going out to all of these pet foods,
Right.
you know.
And there may be some variations on the theme because the symptoms can be a little bit variable. I mean, like I said, we can have some animals have seizures, some don't. Some
Right.
are hemorrhaging from everywhere, others are not.
Right.
Some have the hives and the itching, some do not.
Clumps of
I
hair
think
coming out.
I think a lot of it has to do with the toxic load in the meal that they eat,
Mhm.
because the poison or toxin is not evenly distributed throughout the food. And it also could be that, so all of these pet food companies have multiple plants,
Mhm.
and multiple lines of food running, usually 3 shifts a day around the clock. So it can vary from bag to bag and can to can. This truckload or train car of corn went into this run, and then a new train car came in with whatever the ingredient is for the next run. And so it can be very variable. And so we think, some of these animals that are just having these chronic symptoms of vomiting and diarrhea, just, so many of these animals are being diagnosed with IBD. It's like,
Right.
yeah, or just chronic low level toxin. So we think that the level of exposure has a lot to do with it. But I had God, so many stories. A cat in Illinois, 3 meals. They went out and they bought a different food than what they normally fed, and they thought it was a safe food. 3 meals, dead, and it was a 4-year-old cat, bled out into its chest. So it wasn't vomiting; it actually bled in its chest. A 4-year-old French bulldog, autopsy from Florida, 3 meals, dead. 3 dogs, unrelated, live in the same general area. So they were all buying their food from the same feed store. But the dogs had never seen each other, and the people knew each other loosely. And one woman was talking to another woman and said, "Oh, my dog just died. I bought a new bag of food. After 3 meals, the dog was really sick, went to the emergency room, and the red blood cell count was so low. They did multiple transfusions, and it just was non-responsive, and we lost the dog." The woman on the other end of the phone said, "Oh my God, the same thing just happened to my dog 2 weeks ago." Then they find a third person in the neighborhood. The same exact thing happened to their dog. So you tell me there's nothing going on?
Right.
These dogs are not around each other, not infectious. They all went to the veterinarian. Infectious things were ruled out. They don't, their bone marrow doesn't just shut down randomly, 3 dogs in one neighborhood within a 2-week period.
And the veterinarian probably took no other steps to
Right.
look into the food.
Right.
Right.
No.
Well, it's just like human doctors. They let nutrition be the furthest thing from their mind. It's everything else. It's got to be an infection or something else that's causing it, because they know nothing about nutrition.
Right. And the unfortunate thing is that most people think that the pet food companies would never do anything to harm their animals. They have brand loyalty. They stick with the brand that they think has been working the best. And the problem is that these pet food companies do not care about your pet.
If they cared, first of all, they wouldn't be trying to hide it. They wouldn't be dumping it in landfills. And actually, the other thing is we're seeing these brands. Like if you go on Chewy or Amazon, they're marked like 50 to 70% off right now, and you get a $30 e-coupon along with it. They're literally trying to give it away.
Right. So they're baiting people to recoup their money that they're losing. Go out and buy this at half the cost, and hope to God that you don't kill your dog or cat when you feed it. It's a we got to wake up. We have to wake up. This is what this whole podcast is about. We are trying very hard to get people to wake up to what the system is doing.
Yeah, the system is bad.
But there's
I
solutions out there too, and that's
yeah,
why we have this podcast too, to bring people
Right.
solutions. It
yeah,
is
Yeah,
scary.
that was going to be my
I didn't even
question.
know
yep,
about it.
What's the next step
yep.
for pet owners? What
So
should we
I
do?
want to bring up one more thing in
Sure.
pet food that also occurs in human food, and I never really thought about it until I went down this rabbit hole in the past 2 months. All dried grain products and dried yeast, dried probiotics, the meat and bone meal, any dried product that is stored is fumigated with pesticides to kill bugs and rodents. Because when you store corn, what do you get? Bugs and rodents,
Right.
or any dried ingredient. And so the fumigants that are used, OMG, so toxic. Well, guess what? It's also used on all the grains that we eat.
Right.
And, if it's off gassed correctly, then there's no problem. If it's not done correctly, there was a huge lawsuit about this with one of the pet food companies back in 2012. If it's not done correctly, then the people working around it can get very sick, and it can cause a big problem. So when I found out about this, I was like, oh crap, I'm going to go look in my pantry. I've got 2 kinds of rice in my pantry. And I went in there and I was like, well, crap, these aren't organic. What am I thinking? Because I looked up, can you use these fumigants on organic food? And you can't. You can use CO2 to kill bugs and rodents. Carbon dioxide will kill them, or freezing. So, and like if I buy a bag of flour, I put it in the freezer for a few weeks, make sure there's nothing crawling in there. So I emailed both of the rice companies and I said, so your dried storage products, what fumigant do you use on them? And I listed a few and included carbon dioxide and freezing. And one company never answered. And the other one said, we use a process that is approved by the USDA. And I went, oh, that was the answer I needed.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Never buying your product again. So I usually eat pretty well and eat organic and shop the perimeter of the grocery store. But now I'm like, okay, if it ain't organic, it is not coming in this house if it's a dried product, because I am not eating these chemicals. It's just not happening.
Almost
So,
makes me glad I have celiac disease because I don't eat any grains.
Well, and I've always said, you look at the human side. Our food is being poisoned and chemicalized, all kinds of stuff. Our dogs are eating 100 times worse than what we're eating.
yeah.
So the solutions to this, Judy and I definitely agree on this, and so does Lisa, I know. But whole food feeding is what we should always be doing with our carnivore animals, period. We should have never been feeding grains and starches and carbs ever.
And highly
That's my
processed
opinion.
food. Well, yeah, I mean, so what we've been telling people to do, and oh man, the pushback, it's like, really just feed them real food. Well, my veterinarian said never to give them people food.
Yes.
It's not people food, it's food.
Right.
And your veterinarian's wrong because they can have it. I mean, there are a few things that are toxic. Let's not feed them grapes and raisins and bacon grease,
Right.
but so what we're telling people is feed foods, and it can be a commercial food. There are so many good companies that have evolved in the last 10 years, and it really is a fairly new thing, thank God. Feed food that when you read the ingredients, there's not a list of chemicals added, that it's not an unnamed thing. Like, it needs to be named. I want to see beef lung, beef liver, beef heart, beef muscle, whatever the species of animal that's in the food, what parts and pieces are in there. I don't want
Right.
to see just byproducts, because
Right.
that's
Right.
a nebulous, could be a lot of different
Right.
things.
Sort of like natural flavor. That one always cracks me
Yeah.
up.
And I'm also looking for human grade. And I know that is, well, people say it's more expensive. I actually did a great video in the grocery store back in 2018 where I went around the perimeter of the grocery store and filled my cart up, and I was buying like big packages, like the family size packages of meats that were on sale and veggies and things to make up a really good meal for my dogs. And I calculated it, and all of it together was going to be like $2 a pound. And then I went in the pet store aisle or the pet food aisle, and I started looking at the price labels and reading the ingredients on cans and bags of food. And I was finding, especially the little teeny tiny cans, you're like, oh, it's only 99 cents a can. Yeah, the can is 1.5 ounces. So it's like you just spent $12 a pound for like the worst crap in the world.
Right.
And oh, my dog likes it. Well, of course he likes it. It's got palatants in there. It's
Right.
got things in there that make him go, ooh, yummy. It smells so good.
Yeah,
And
but you're also playing Russian roulette with their life.
That's right.
well, but the thing is, you can, if you're a good shopper and if you're willing to do some of the work yourself, it's like when you buy a human grade meal for your pet that somebody else took the time to make. And if you're getting gently cooked, they took the time to make it. They took the time to cook it. They took the time and money and expense to ship it to you. So and on dry ice, and it arrives at your house as a little doggy TV dinner. That's awesome. But it's going to cost more than putting something together yourself. And I have coached people for the past 15 years, maybe 20, probably longer, on making their own pet food and making it balanced and complete and having good nutrition in the bowl. And I literally have had people my office manager used to store purses in her oven. I taught her how to make food for her dog. I had another client who stored shoes in their oven. And I'm like, look, guys, we got to use the oven for what it's, they're like, well, it's an empty box I wasn't using. It was a good place for storage. I had one woman who didn't know how to turn on her stove or oven. And I said, so how do you eat? And she's talking about, her dog loves when she feeds her chicken and this kind of stuff. And I'm like, where's the dog getting the chicken that you're feeding if you don't cook anything? From my TV dinners. And I'm like, so, she said, I guess I could go ask my neighbor to teach me how to turn on the oven. I'm like, you're going to burn your house down. No, thank you. And I just said to her, look, if I can get TV dinners delivered for your dog, can you warm them up in the microwave or, whatever. And I thought this is going to be 1,000 times better than anything this poor dog has been served in the past. And she was like, oh, that would be amazing. So, there's a lot of companies that do that now. And she was pleased as could be. There's also foods, base mixes that are human grade. All you do is add your own meat. So it's like, this is pretty simple. You add warm water to rehydrate it and then throw meat in the bowl, and you can cook the meat or not cook the meat. I don't care. So there are a lot of simple ways to do it, and it doesn't have to break the bank. When I was making my own food for my dogs, at one time I had 10 dogs, and I would grind 200 pounds of food in an afternoon, twice a month.
Yep.
And
Yep.
put it in
We
the
did the
freezer.
same thing. Yep. And I always tell everybody, what would you rather do? Spend a little bit more money on whole food for your animals, or spend that $700 at the veterinarian who doesn't understand what nutrition to begin with, doesn't understand how to fix your dog, but here's a drug that you're going to take that's now going to cost you $160 a month because your dog needs to be on it for the rest of their lives.
This is just like humans. It is. You pay it forward. You either pay for good nutrition or you pay for taking care of poor health later. Yep. And people they opt for convenience over good nutrition. And that's the mindset that's got to change. Whether it's human or pet, you really need to eat well.
What we found out in this whole debacle, because my social media following, people come find me because I'm holistic and they want to learn this stuff. That's what my books are about, like how to do things naturally, how to make your pet live longer by avoiding the drugs and the chemicals. So my social media platform, these people have like some level of knowledge by the time they come to me. What has been just earth shattering is this page where 100,000 people came that thought they were doing the best for their pets. I go to a concierge doctor, and he always opts for natural treatments first. And if the natural treatments don't get us where we want to be, then we have discussions about chemicals, and I always turn them down so far. So it's like, no, we're going to find a way around this. And so my blood pressure has been a little high lately.
Wonder why.
Exactly. Wonder why, death threats in my email that you kind of will do that. So he said, well, and I had told him what was going on. And he said, well, it's stress and we need to get your stress level down. And so I asked him what he was feeding his dog, and he was feeding the brand that started this whole problem. And I have a therapist that we go to. She was feeding her dogs. Now, these are smart, well-educated people who have, brand recognition. People recognize the names of these foods,
Right.
and they think because of advertising
Right.
and because the veterinary community stands
Yep.
behind them, that this is what they should be feeding.
And that's
really interesting. So my therapist, I kept telling her, you got to change the food, you got to change the food. And she was dragging her feet. So I took a whole bunch of food out of our warehouse and treats and dropped them off at her office in a big box. And I said, you will not feed your dogs that stuff anymore. You got to change. And she has dachshunds, I think. And I saw her this past week, and she said, oh my gosh, my dogs won't even touch the old food anymore. I'm like, well, they're smart.
right.
And she said, you know what? They're not licking. They're not itching. Their feet aren't red. Their stomachs aren't gurgling. Like their coats look better. It's been like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So, and I will just say right out loud, if you're buying the food in the grocery store, you are not getting a high quality food. I don't care if it says natural. I don't care if it says organic. I don't care what it says. You are not getting good food in the grocery store for your pets, period.
Do you want us to show the last list that we have?
That's totally up to you. And I can explain go ahead and I'll explain the list. So we were for a while posting a new list every week to 2 weeks. These are all companies that we have gotten consumer complaints. And in order to get on the list, there had to be a lot of consumer complaints. It wasn't like one dog with diarrhea. So one of the things that we did is we made up a survey for pet owners with sick pets to fill out. And then we went through the surveys, and we asked them things like, is your pet on flea and tick chemical medications? Is it on heartworm preventative? Does your pet have any other disease problems? Diabetes, Cushing's disease, other things that we need to rule out. Was this what were the symptoms, and were they associated with opening a new bag, box, or can? And so we got thousands of responses on the survey, and we weeded out the ones that could have been something else. And what we found is, of the reports that we got, it was about a 20% death rate in those reports. And these are all brands that people mentioned. And remember, I said we got thousands of reports. And then if we were getting a lot of reports on a food, then we would also go on third-party websites, Chewy, Amazon, Petco, wherever pet food is sold, and we would look for those 1-star reviews to corroborate. And so it had to come from multiple directions in order for it to happen. And people were fine with this, and the pet store, independent pet store retailers, they're our friends, and we love them. That's how I know Tammy. But they've even been giving pushback. And the reason they're giving pushback, they were real happy when we were throwing big brands under the bus that we've been trying to get people to move away from. But there's a couple of foods on here that people thought were really high end. And frankly, I used to think so too on a couple of them. And so they got really mad because now people are coming in and saying, I can't feed this anymore. It made the list. And people are mad at me, blaming me, saying that, there's no proof behind this. The only proof I have is a bunch of dead animals and a bunch of sick animals and a bunch of reports from pet parents. And I didn't start this. I didn't cause this. I'm a reporter. I'm just an honest reporter who is reporting what I'm seeing. And this is what we're seeing.
This list is not this is not the whole list. I mean, there really is more kibble brand companies that could be actually added to that.
Oh yeah, there's a lot more. I mean, it's just because some brands are more popular than others.
Right.
And so if it's a brand that's selling millions of bags a day,
Right.
they're going to have more reports.
Right.
And that's, part of what people have been pushing back. Well, if this was a huge problem across the board, we'd have a lot more sick pets. Well, first of all, I guarantee you there are hundreds of thousands of sick pets out there that we don't know about,
Right.
because people
Absolutely.
haven't heard about it, or they're not reporting it, or they haven't correlated the two things together. Like a lot of people were saying, wow, my dog was having this chronic diarrhea, vomiting off and on. So I took him off the kibble, put them on a bland diet. They got better. They were doing great. So 5 days later, I put them back on the kibble. It started up again, put them back on the bland diet. They got better, put them back on the kibble, the diarrhea again. And it's like, and how many times do you have to do that before you go, wow, maybe the kibble's a problem?
Right. Well,
so I'm wondering, Dr. Judy, we're at our time. I wanted to know if you had a call to action for the people listening.
Oh my gosh. Call to action. Be vigilant. Be really, really vigilant. And if there's any way you can do it. And oh, by the way, we're mostly talking extruded kibbles here. There are a few baked kibbles on the market, companies that I actually don't mind. I don't feed kibble, and I don't want to feed kibble. And that's a whole different conversation.
That's right.
There's
That's another podcast.
A lot of reasons why I don't, but there are some baked kibble companies out there that, and I'll just mention Carnivore. They're a really high end, very, very good owners of that company that really do care about pets, and pets do very well on the food, but it's not cheap. It's not going to be any cheaper than it's just
Whole food.
It's just convenient. So the call to action is feed as much whole food as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have been feeding something that's on that list, be very careful when you buy a new bag, box, or can. If your pet is backing away from it or saying, I don't know if I want to eat it, listen to them. Do not make them eat it. If it smells funny, if it looks, most of this stuff smells bad. I've got probably 100 different samples of pet food that people have sent to my office, and they're in these large, like Rubbermaid totes with lids on them. And every time I have to go get a sample out of there, I open that lid and it takes my breath away. The smell is bad.
Stinks.
And it literally hurts my chest.
Yeah.
This stuff, it is bad. Our pets, we have 6 million scent receptors. Our dogs have like 200 million, and our cats have like 30 million. They can detect stuff long before we can. That's why we use dogs to sniff cancer. They can detect things long before we can.
Right.
So, but like I said, it's scary because a lot of these pets, it's 3 meals, and it's not like they're acting off after the first meal and a little more off after the second meal. It's like the third meal, they're down, they're done. That's it. It's bad.
Well, can I throw this out there? I try to be more self-sustainable, and I like saving money as well. I raise rabbits, so I feed raw to you feed rabbits hay, $4 a bale of hay, and in 2 months you'll have 45 pounds of fresh meat that you raised yourself and know what's in it. I raise chickens. They free range in the summertime. They eat the bugs and the grasshoppers and everything for free. Okay. And then I feed the chickens to my dogs, the eggs to my dogs. And then during hunting season, in Pennsylvania here, you could get 6 hunting licenses this year. Get a deer for your pets and feed them that throughout the year. That can be the cheapest option available there, but it doesn't have to be expensive. And some of the healthier options, like I just mentioned, can save you way more money if you just put a little time into it.
Yep. Yeah, my husband's daughter has had 2 big German Shepherds. She's down to 1, but they have fed raw since the get-go. They don't have much money, and they have a lot of friends who hunt, and those friends drop off big bags of all the parts and pieces and leftovers from the deer that most people don't eat: the deer liver, the deer heart, the deer kidneys, the deer tongue. So many parts and pieces it's so nutritious for our dogs. I love feeding organ meat. When I say I'm against byproducts, I'm against the byproducts that are allowed in that shouldn't be allowed in.
Right.
But organ meats are considered byproducts, and they're very healthy for our pets, and they should be eating them. So, we bought chickens years ago because I wanted eggs for the dogs, not for us, but for the dogs. And now we have a flock of almost 30. And we get a lot of eggs, but now all the people, I'm feeding two families plus my employees about every other week each get a dozen eggs, and they really love it on egg day. Because the girls are doing a really good job. And actually one of our employees is going to start raising meat chickens. And I'm like, that's awesome. I'll trade eggs for meat any day.
Well, and that's what it's going to come down to. We need to start networking. We used to have people that hunted and would bring us rib bones all the time every year for our dogs, and find people that hunt. Find other ways to feed your dog, but yeah, please please stay away from the kibble. That is my biggest. It's awful.
Yep.
But
So, Dr. Judy, if people want to learn more about what you're doing and the work that you're actively trying to help with this kibble industry, tell us where we can find you, how we can reach out, what we can do to help this Kibblegate issue that's going on.
Oh my gosh. Well, if anybody has a bodyguard that they want to loan out, that would be great. Because I'm going to Global Pet next week and it could get ugly.
Yeah.
I was just at the biggest veterinary conference in the country in January, right after this broke. It was ugly. I wouldn't even wear my shirt with my name on it. I was like, I've got a target on my back. I'm trying to hide. Meanwhile, I was there signing books. I was in a big booth signing my books. It's like, oh my gosh, like, could you let me be just a little less conspicuous? But
Right.
I'm going to be in a booth at Global, so I'm going to be conspicuous again. But people can get more information on my social media, which is all under Dr. Judy Morgan. So it's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. And then my website is drjudymorgan.com. So it's all very cohesive and very easy.
We have all the links in the description as well.
Yep. And we have tons of free resources. So if you're thinking about making food for you, and one of the things that we get from people is, well, my vet says my pet has to eat this prescription diet for the rest of their life. Prescription diet for kidney disease, heart disease, liver disease, crystals in the urine, you name it. We have recipes on the website, free downloads for heart disease for dogs and cats, for kidney disease for dogs and cats, for a lot of different things. They're free downloads. Yes, you do have to put in your information to get the free download, but hey, give me a break. So you don't have to buy anything. I do have recipe books. I've written 7 books. Those are on the website. They're on Amazon. Just look up Dr. Judy Morgan. It'll come up. So if you're interested in going a more natural route with your pets, as far as food, vaccinations, chemicals, getting rid of, allergies, chronic disease, we have tons of information every month on our social media. We do a focus week. This month it's on urinary tract disease and kidney disease. We did heart disease last month. And actually coming up, we're going to do a focus on the veterinary industry.
That'll be a good
Very
one.
nice. We would love to have you back on, because I know you touch on natural ways for flea and tick prevention and how the chemicals in the topicals are, neurotoxins and harm our pets, and then the vaccines as well. We could do 2 separate shows there, and we have so many followers that have so many questions.
Yeah.
Even having you back on for a Q&A, that would be awesome as well.
That's fine.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, we want to thank you so much for your time. This has been so enlightening. And we do, like Lisa says, we'd love to have you back. We are total supporters of the work that you're doing. And we're here to spread your message far and wide.
Thank you. That's the whole goal at this point. When I retired from clinical practice, I said, you know what? I can reach a lot more people with my voice.
Yes.
On as much as I'm not a fan of social media, but I can reach a lot more people than I can one-on-one in my veterinary office. Doesn't make those who used to have the one-on-one as happy. And I get that, but I really need to be the voice for our pets and be their advocate, and somebody has to stand up for them and somebody has to put a stop to what's going on. So this pet food research project has consumed my life for the past 2 months. I literally don't sleep because I wake up and what is running through my head? Pet food. And it makes me a little crazy. I do have to say it's making me a little crazy.
Well, whoever is against you is on the dark side. That's all you have to know. That's all anybody has to know.
Yeah, we just say, God bless you, Dr. Judy, for all that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Judy.
Sure. Yes, thank you. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Good night.
Good night.